Today, it is I that is the idiot. I, in an attempt to be incredibly entertaining on my Twitch stream, decided to try to headbutt my camera. I threw my head forward at such great force with the gravitational pull of this entire forehead and ended up smacking my face against this incredibly solid piece of iron called a mic stand. I now have a massive cut on the inside of my top lip that you cannot see, but it seriously affected my ability to process anything going on with what I'm supposed to talk about. But I persist. The reason that I persist, because somebody called for help. Specifically, this person, Riesholt, said, "Can you give a clear view of this?" And it's a quote of somebody from, I think, Sky Sports News, talking about the fact that the Premier League is shifting the way that it talks about financial rules, not shifting the way the Premier League clubs voted to basically have a new financial structure, which is a good idea. So I decided to dig into it. There's lots of good different reporting that happened on the subject. And essentially, I answered the call. You put up the bat signal. I have the answer. I've got everything you need to know right here, signed, sealed, and delivered. Okay. What happened was all of the Premier League clubs got together and unanimously voted to adopt what is essentially the system that Europe already uses, right? So right now, what the Premier League was using, if you did not know, let me catch up because it's now leaving, so you're learning just in time for it not to matter anymore. Good for you. Is the Profit and Sustainability Rules, or PSR. And the Profit and Sustainability Rules essentially said that you basically could only take a certain amount of loss, right? The loss amounting to a little over £30 million per season. This is something that clubs like Everton violated flagrantly, in large part because of the COVID pandemic and paying James Rodriguez the entire GDP of Tuvalu. Both of those things contributing in equal measure, right, to a couple of clubs running into significant financial issues. Nottingham Forest running into the issue that June 30th is the cutoff, but the transfer window ends in the end of August, so they had to make a decision whether to sell somebody for less money before the deadline and sell somebody at the end of the transfer window for more money, but then be in slight violation of the profit and sustainability rules. But instead, they are voting to adopt UEFA's rules. Now, they're not going into effect right away. So the vote is the initial step in having these all go in effect in 2025, 2026. So the season that, not the next one that starts, but the one after that. That would be the season that this goes into place. And the way that Europe works is it's a percent of revenue that you are allowed to spend. So this isn't like a giant paradigm shift here. But there is one really cool thing in here that the Premier League is doing that I find refreshing, and at least some small attempt to try and rectify the issues that are created by this kind of financial tomfoolery. Right now, it could lead to more tomfoolery in the future, but we're going to get to that. Essentially, the rule that the Premier League clubs voted for is in line with UEFA's cost control mechanisms. That's what they call them. And that would be that it's a 70% rule. And that means that you can spend 70% of your total club revenue on stuff to do with players and staff. So transfers, agent fees, wage, all that. 70% of your revenue can be spent on that. And that's the deal, right? That it is still tied to how much money that you make as a club, right? There's not a giant issue. There's no step away from the issues that have been flying around with very various point deductions that I have complained about, because there's an obvious issue when you're punishing teams for multiple seasons of past misconduct in one season that's happening now, and teams keep moving up and down the table, a la Everton or Nottingham Forest in this case, and then they appeal and they move back. Like you never know where exactly you stand. That's a problem. That issue's not going away. It says minor breaches. This is in the Guardian report. There's some reports like this all over the place, though. Minor breaches of the new rules could result in financial penalties, but points deductions still remain the chosen sanction for any serious breach. And most of the things that actually make it into the news and become really significant are going to be the serious breaches of the 70% rule. But there is something refreshing here. The 85% figure that's being thrown around, right? So 70% of the revenues on player-related costs, transfer fees, agent wages, whatever. The other clubs being the clubs that are not in Europe, would be able to spend 85% of their revenue on different things. And the Guardian goes further. They go further and note that part of the league, this is part of the league's desire not to limit ambition among challenger teams. This is the thing I found so refreshing. This is kind of mind-boggling, right? They actually seem to notice that the issue with FFP, the issue with profit and sustainability rules, is that it keeps the rich rich and the poor poor. And if you got your clubs in Europe and they're adhering to some sort of European FFP here with the 70%, the clubs that aren't in Europe are now adhering to an 85% of their revenue rule. This allows clubs that aren't in Europe to spend a higher percent of the revenue that they earn. This is not to be mistaken as Bournemouth is now going to be able to spend more than Manchester United. That's not the case, right? If you are in Europe, you're any of those clubs in Europe, whether it be West Ham or Manchester United or freaking Manchester City, right? You are still going to be making a lot more money in revenue, likely, unless we have like a Leicester City situation, right? Or some team happens to sneak itself into Europe, because Premier League's getting 8 European spots essentially every year now because of the change to the Champions League format that's coming next year. I'm sure I'll make a video about that at some point if you didn't know the Champions League format was changing next year. It's all European competitions, by the way, but there will be basically 8 spots in the Premier League now, so some weird team could sneak into European play, and then they might not be, they may really be hampered by this because their revenues haven't quite gone up yet, but now they're limited to 70%. But in every other case, the teams that are regularly, or at least kind of sometimes in Europe, like an Aston Villa or West Ham, right, where they're just on a hot streak right now, well, those clubs are earning greater revenue, to where the 70% of that revenue is going to be more than 85% of what Luton can spend, right, or even what Crystal Palace can spend. And so this isn't something that's allowing those mid-table mediocrity teams, those kings of the mid-table, to actually start spending more money than the clubs that are at the top. It's just something that allows them to compete, right? Because if we're holding everybody to the same standard, obviously the revenues are way out of whack. So this is really cool. I really, really like this. I have no other thoughts on it other than the fact that I really like it. That's a lie. I do have one other thought on it, because it is going to get confusing, particularly for those weird clubs that happen to make it into Europe one season. They scrap their way to 8th or 7th in the table if somebody wins a weird cup. Or maybe, you've got a team in the Championship or a team that gets relegated a la Wigan Athletic that wins the FA Cup, and now all of a sudden they find themselves situated in Europe and they are subject to a different set of financial rules. Not only would that be kind of unfair and against the spirit of the whole reason this is happening in the first place, it could get complicated. Like if you're in Europe just one out of the past 3 seasons, you've got one season that you were only able to be at 70% of your revenue, while the other 2 seasons you were able to be at 85% of your revenue. This creates the same issue that we currently have with the way Premier League applies its financial rules, where there's one set of financial rules in the Championship, there's another set of financial rules in the Premier League, and you can appease one and violate the other, and then how are you even doing punishments, right? Because Leicester City is being investigated by the Premier League. Well, they're currently in the Championship doing their best to bottle automatic promotion, right? So there is a lot of potential weird chaos going on with the 70 and 85% as well. But I will take that chaos. And I will take it because as long as your heart is in the right place, and that is what's happening here for the Premier League, right? As long as their heart is in the right place, and it is, then I'm willing to take the mishaps that go with it, because here we are trying to at least create a more level playing field in the Premier League. And we're also acknowledging the fact that it is darn near impossible to go bankrupt as a Premier League club, especially when you are not even spending 100% of your revenue on particular players. We're talking about 85% here. This isn't some wild free love sort of nonsense that they're trying to put in here, right? This isn't Woodstock, right? This is like the cool accountant instead of the normal accountants, right? This is the cool kids table at the accounting firm. Still not even spending your entire revenue. And we're talking about clubs right now that are in tough financial situations. Reading's one that comes to mind. They were spending over like 200% in this calculation. And so if you can keep things at 85%, you're always going to have a healthy financial club, to be entirely honest with you. It would take some amazing black magic wizardry in order to make that not happen. Now, this isn't fully official yet. This was a unanimous vote. The vote in terms of how to institute it was not unanimous, so it does sound like there's going to have to be some sort of ironing out process. There is some big brouhaha happening this summer. Like the details not being particularly important, but this was the initial vote. they're going to have hopefully all of this unanimously agreed upon by the time they get to the summer, which is the big powwow where this stuff can kind of be put on the books officially to move forward with, which is not the case right now. It is not on the books officially, although it is incredibly likely to go on the books this summer. They just need to iron out how to institute it. But again, the way they're trying to do it right now is in 2025, 2026. This would go into place. So there'd still be like another year for Everton to get 5 different point deductions and then appeal them and have them reduced by half. So that's something to look forward to, right? We're not going to lose the greatest attraction of the Premier League season, which is who's getting fined next. Everybody except for Manchester City, because it does, I understand, take a long time to investigate 115 charges of inflating the value of something. That makes complete sense to me. I appreciate that thought process. So the big brouhaha in the summer is called the Premier League's annual general meeting, according to The Athletic, and that is where this whole thing can be fully officially ratified, and then it will shadow the PSR, so like both of them will be going on at the same time. At least that's the plan they have right now. So, you know, by the time we get to 2025, 2026, there will already be a year of financial data with the 70%, 85% thing that could then be retroactively applied to any future sanctions. So this isn't a massive change. Like if you were just not paying attention at all, you wouldn't notice a massive change, but it is at least a single solitary step, it seems, in the right direction to creating slightly better competitive balance. They have still done nothing to address the absurdity of all these random point deductions during the middle of the season, but if I just keep beating the drum, maybe eventually they will do something about that. I don't know. I'm not the person in charge of the Premier League. I'm just a guy. True story. See ya.